mentioned earlier, it's my honor to do this. I have a passion for doing this. And again, people ask me, how does it feel to be retired? And actually, it's been almost 40 years. 40 years in the most amazing profession I ever could have imagined. Started off in the city of El Cajon, here east of here in San Diego, and almost 35 years actually with the county. And when people ask me, how does it feel to be retired? I says, well, it's kind of good, it's kind of bad, it's kind of weird, it's awesome, it's all the above. I'm schizophrenic, I guess. But now I'm as busy as I choose to be. And now I get to really involve myself in the things I have passion for. And I'm still involved with the International Fire Chiefs Group, specifically on emergency medical services. And I get to do this kind of stuff as often as I want. And it's awesome. And my wife and I get to spend more time together, although she's an active realtor. We've got 3 grown kids. I'm not exactly sure how this happened, but one of them is 38. The other's 35, and our daughter's 34. We've got 11 grandkids, and our daughter's got 5 boys. I know. She kept trying for a girl, and eventually says, Daddy, God does not want me to have a girl, so we're giving up, waving the white flag. So now she's got 5 boys, 9, 8, 6, 4, and 8 months. She homeschools, and she's married to a pastor. God bless her. She is a busy, busy gal. But the time that Teresa and I get to spend with our grandkids is amazing. Watching your kids raise kids is a blessed experience. And when we get to have all 18 of us at the house, I call it blessed chaos, because it is. So retirement's a great thing. January 1st is my first official day of retirement after almost 40 years. Quick question. Each of you should have 2 handouts. If you don't, raise your hand, and my beautiful wife will come around and she'll make sure that you have both of them. So keep your hand raised. If you don't have one of these, I'll give you one of mine. Which one are you missing? Both. How did you sneak past Teresa? Anybody else? Anybody else over here? Blue one. Got it. You're welcome. Anybody? Anybody? Going once? Going twice? All right. Well, for those of you that weren't here on the first session, we talked about the essentials of management. For those that were here, the 3 pillars of management are people, process, strategy. Oh, you make my heart just jump. Okay, this is great. Now we're going to talk about leadership. And I tell you what, as I mentioned this morning or earlier this afternoon, you cannot be a competent manager without being a competent leader, and vice versa. You can't be a competent leader without being a competent manager if you're at a significant level in the organization. This is absolutely critical. Now, I will spend time during this session using this word a lot, because if you're a leader, you likely have people that work for you that are entrusted to you. And as I mentioned earlier, the word entrusted has a connotation that's a game changer, because people are trusted to you for you to make them better, for you to support them, for you to care for them, for you to make them into better workers and future managers. That's a heavy responsibility. That's why I use that word entrusted a lot. So our corporate society desperately needs competent leadership. I tell you what, this is an old slide, but Enron, Arthur Andersen, Adelphia, Dinergy, Global Crossing, Merrill Lynch, Tyco, WorldCom, all of them betrayed their stockholders, betrayed their workers, and sold their integrity and their character out, oftentimes for money. So our corporate society is most certainly rife with scandals. Now, what's interesting, many of us would think, well, the fire service, and as I mentioned before, I say that all of us in this room are employed in some way, shape, or form as a component of fire service. So many of us would ask, well, there's no breaches of leadership in the fire service, is there? Well, Google is an interesting thing. And I typed in breaches of leadership in the fire service. Any idea how many hits I got? Oh, come on. How many? Millions? Oh, you've read the paper, haven't you? You know, it's interesting. Search of fire department scandals, over 5 million web page references were given. Yeah, now some of these were duplicates, I get that. But the problem is we're not immune to this kind of stuff. And this is driven primarily because of a lack of character and a lack of integrity. So our corporate society certainly needs leadership, but the question is, what is it? Yeah, okay. Is this leadership? No. This is compulsion. Anybody recognize this picture? General Douglas MacArthur. Prior to the outbreak of World War II, MacArthur was stationed in Manila with a military contingent way too small to defend from the wave of war that would soon overtake them. With his army defeated and retreating to Bataan, his air force shredded, MacArthur was ordered back to Australia by President Roosevelt. Disheartened and defeated, MacArthur left the island with an infamous promise, I shall return. Yes. In October of 1944, the world watched as MacArthur fulfilled his promise by walking through the waves back onto the Philippine beaches after engineering one of the most brilliant two-prong attacks that defeated the enemy. Especially in the time of World War II, that was leadership. So, management or leadership? Ooh, think about this. This is a profound statement. You can build a throne with bayonets, but you can't sit on it for long. Profound if you think about it, but more profound if you think about who coined the phrase. Boris Yeltsin. So even the communists understand that compulsion is not effective. True leadership is effective. But gladly, major corporations are beginning now to get it. Coca-Cola. Robert Gazzetta was a chairman and chief executive of Coke until he unexpectedly died of cancer in 1997. When he took over Coke in 1981, the company's value was $4 billion. Under his leadership, it rose to more than $150 billion, an increase of over 3,500%. How many of you would like to own Coke stock back in those days? But here's something significant. Before he was diagnosed with cancer, he was interviewed by the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and he stated that retirement was not even on his radar screen. As long as I'm having fun, as long as I have the energy necessary, as long as I am not keeping my people from their day in the sun, and as long as the board wants me to stay, I will stay. What was the most important aspect of his leadership? His people. The people that are entrusted to him. As long as I'm having fun, as long as I'm energy necessary, as long as I'm not keeping my people from their day in the sun. It wasn't about his day in the sun, it was about his people's day in the sun. In his character, he recognized his most important resource was his people. Our military now gets it as well. The West Point Code, a cadet will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those that do. Character. Norman Schwarzkopf pointed to the significance of leadership when he stated, leadership is the potent combination of strategy and character, but if you must be without one, be without strategy. You do not lead people by hitting them over the head. That's assault, not leadership. Dwight D. Eisenhower. A few days before D-Day, Eisenhower told his staff, quote, if we succeed on the beaches of Normandy in a few days, it will be due to the strength and courage of our soldiers. If we fail, it'll be my fault. Wow. How many times do we see that kind of character in a leader today? A story that my wife's great uncle shared with her. He served in World War II, and he fought in Germany. One particular battle was the Battle of Dickerscheid in Germany, for which he, Clyde, and his brother, Fay, were fighting in the army, side by side, shoulder to shoulder. I believe it was one of the first battles of the day. The older brother, Fay, was hit by a mortar blast and was instantly killed. Right next to his 16-year-old, 18-year-old brother. 18 years old, and you just watch your brother get killed. And the worst part about it is they had to leave him behind as they went from battle to battle to battle. And one of the later battles of the day, one of the things they had to do was take a farmhouse that was on a higher portion of the hill that was at that point in time controlled by the Germans, who was picking off the Allied soldiers as they got anywhere close to it. And a young lieutenant got his platoon together with my wife's great uncle Clyde in attendance, and he took a stick and he drew a battle plan in the dirt on how that group was going to take over this farmhouse. And one of the things he said, and Clyde remembered this decades later, like it was yesterday. He says, this young lieutenant said, I am going to run across this bridge which crosses this creek. And I'm going to be firing my machine gun and yelling and screaming, and when they take me out, I want you guys to do this. And sure enough, he did as he told him he would do. He ran across this bridge, yelling and firing his machine gun, and certainly as he predicted, he was killed. He was shot in the head, and back in those times, the soldiers used to keep rolled up toilet paper on their helmet. And one of the things that Clyde remembers is as the young lieutenant fell, the toilet paper that came out of his helmet, and that slowly settled to the ground. Sacrificial leadership. Holy cow. A man who is willing to give up his life for his people and for the mission. Wow. So certainly our military gets it. But ladies and gentlemen, we all need to get it. A leader truly inspires followers. If a leader has no followers, they are not by definition a leader. This is important to understand. So what we're going to do, well, first off, there was an interesting book. I wish I could remember the name of it. John Maxwell, in Leadership 101. He says, every leader, when they're given a position of authority, when they're promoted, has a certain amount of change in their pocket. And as a leader begins to make decisions, if they make bad decisions, they pay change out. When they make good decisions, they get to put change back in their pocket. But if you make eventually enough bad decisions, you reach into your pocket and you realize you have no more change. And when that happens, you're done as a leader. You may still hold the position, you may still hold the rank, but what you lost is something that you'll probably never regain, and that is the trust of your people, because you failed them. So remember, as you're a leader, you only got a certain amount of change in your pocket, and some of the bad decisions you make will be worth a quarter, some will be worth a penny, but nonetheless, you got a limited amount of change in your pocket. So be careful with your integrity and your character. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about the 3 pillars of leadership: character, competence, and connection. Now, what we're going to do today is we're going to spend the vast majority of our time talking about the character component, because the competence piece, that is specific to whatever job you do. And the competence that I had to have in my previous position before I retired, or the position that you have, is going to be different. So we're not going to talk about competence too much. But what I can say, as I said earlier today, is you can be a great leader, but if you lack competence in your job, you'll be nothing more than a nice person. You will not be a leader, because it requires competence as well. And again, I asked this question earlier today when we talk about character, competence, and connection. Connection to what? Connection to who? The people who have been entrusted to your leadership. Character, competence, and connection. So we're going to talk about the essential character traits of a leader. What I want to do is I want to provide you a meaningful measuring tool to measure your existing level of leadership. Okay. When you were in college, how many of you like Cliff Notes? Okay, me too. So many of you have, so I'll grab this from you, a handout like this. And yes, I noticed one of my first mistakes, and it's going to be one of many. There's only 10 character traits in the package. The cover sheet says 12. Ugh, I hate that. But open up this. I want you to open up to the first one. Doesn't matter. These are the cliff notes that we're going to talk about. Each of the character traits that we're going to talk about today has a cliff note page, looks just like this. And this is organized. We're going to talk about why is this character trait so important? Why do you need to do this? And then most importantly, or not most importantly, but equal as importantly, is how do I apply this principle? And then thirdly, how do I know I'm successful at applying this principle? And so this is what's actually going to be meaningful to you. I can talk all day, and I hate when I hear this, is people talk about pie in the sky philosophy principles. You ought to do this, but with no practical instruction about how you do that. I'm not going to betray you like that today. So we're going to talk about why it's important. We're going to talk about how you can do it, and then we're going to talk about a meaningful measuring tool to see how you're doing currently with this particular leadership skill. Now, if you look at the lower left corner, what does it say there? Self-assessment. And I tell you, this is going to be a private assessment. Write it small, I don't care, but please, when I give you the opportunity, when I ask a question, I want you to write an assessment of yourself. Scale of 1 to 5. 5? Okay, I got it. How do I know I'm being successful? Yeah, I see these things in my life. Got it. I feel comfortable with that. 5. What the heck is Metro talking about? That gets a 1. So I really want you to rate yourself on these categories. And then also, as you'll notice on the very bottom, if I turned you away with no meaningful tools that you can study these issues, become better, then I've also betrayed you. And so what I've done is I've given you recommendations, reading material. And I haven't necessarily put, go read this whole book. Usually I put on there, read this chapter or read these number of chapters. And as we talk about today, if you don't do anything with this, this class will just become background clutter in about 3 days. So what I really want you to do tonight or tomorrow is if you find yourself rating yourself maybe at a 3 or less, then please go purchase the book that I recommend. And it is so easy nowadays. These crazy devices, you can buy the doggone book in like 2 minutes. So please do that. I really encourage you to do that. But that is what these this document is for. We're going to be using this along with the handout that I gave you, or that Teresa gave you a little bit earlier. So we're going to provide a meaningful measuring tool. We're going to be talking about the importance of competency, but not very much, and then discuss the importance of being connected to those people who have been entrusted to your leadership. So that's our approach to our time together for about the next hour and a half. So again, the 3 pillars of leadership are, what are they again? Character, competence, connection. The 3 pillars of management are people, process, and strategy. Oh, this is going good. Okay. So, and again, we talked about this in the earlier class. There are very 2 distinct skill sets, right? Management and leadership, 2 very distinct skill sets. Leadership is more about your personal integrity and character. Management is about organizational management skills, but nonetheless, remember we talked about there is a connection. Oops, I thought the next slide was going to be about the connection. But remember class, what the connection was? People, process, and strategy, character, competence, and connection. What is the strategy of management to leadership? People. Yeah, that is a connection. Even though 2 distinct skill sets, there's a connection between the people, process, and management and leadership. And it makes sense. Because who are you connected to? The people who have been entrusted to your leadership. And that goes right over to the people process of management. So they're linked together, they're joined at the hip, but they're 2 very distinct skill sets. People process strategy. So as we talked about our approach to time together, we're going to talk about, I'm going to discuss the mindset. Why is this particular character trait important? How do you need to apply this principle? This is the pliers and the screwdrivers that you're going to hopefully put in your back pocket and walk out of this room and be able to use them tonight. How will I know if you're successful in applying these principles? That is what's going to help you assess yourself. And again, I promise I'm not going to ask for anybody's input on their self-assessments, nor will I collect any papers. This is private between just you. But if you don't do anything with this information within 48 hours, it will go away. It will go away, become a clutter in your inbox or your next project list. You've got to do something with it in 48 hours or it'll go away. That's just human nature. So again, I hope you do something with it. So the first C, the character of a true leader, leadership begins with you. I tell you can't walk away from this principle. If you want to lead, then the first step is your own character. Now, what I've done is I've taken the 10 or so character traits and I divided them into 3 clusters. Is the character traits of mental toughness. Let me back up a little bit. The character traits that lead to building a team, and the character traits that lead to corporate or organizational success. So the 10 or so character traits are divided into 3 clusters, and that's how we're going to approach this today. So the character traits of mental toughness. A leader needs to be definitive and decisive. Really, Metro? I came to a class where you're going to tell me that I've got to make good decisions, that I've got to be definitive and decisive? Yes, I am, but hang on. Why? Because correct decisions will not only impact people's lives, is they will impact the health of the organization as well. People will not follow you if not certain of yourself as a leader. Now let me give you an example on the fire service. How many of you heard, and there's lots of terms for this, hazing in the firehouse, kidding around, joking, fraternity jokes, whatever moniker you want to put to it. Let me give an example of how the evolution of pranking in the firehouse works. First off, the most important principle of pranking in the firehouse is, what was that? Oh no, you're getting way too technical. He said prohibited. No, I'm talking much more college fraternity stuff over here. I'm talking that the number one principle of pranking in the firehouse is I don't get even, I get ahead. And so here a joke happens in the firehouse. And now that person says, ooh, that was a pretty good one, but now I'm going to get you back. And so it starts over here like this. I'm going to get you back. 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 I'm going to get you back even worse. I'm going to do something really stupid over here to get you back even worse. And eventually it crashes into the walls and eventually evolves into an LA Times article and the department loses $5 million and people get demoted. And hearts are broken, careers are ruined. You know why that happened? Because there was not a leader anywhere in this evolution of firehouse pranking that had enough courage to stand up and say no. Saying, this is going nowhere quick. Stop it. Oh, Cap, come on. We're just having fun. I tell you, there's a couple of people that I've talked to who have been fired from one of the greatest jobs around, who said, I wish someone earlier in my career would have told me no. So correct, definitive, decisive decisions are important, but they're also important to the people who have been trusted to your leadership. And you have to have the courage to sometimes say no. And it's a cowardly act when you don't. So correct and definitive decisions are one of the character traits of a leader. That is, why? How? Well, this is not rocket science, folks. But this is a picture of a real fire. That is a 5-story hospital building. I was the assistant chief in Division 5 in the Antelope Valley. I'll never forget this day. Gerald Cozy was my battalion chief. Him and I were meeting in my office. He gets a page, hospital fire, Palmdale Hospital, engine 24, engine 37, engine... And Gerald said, don't worry, Chief, I'll be right back. These are never anything. I saw he pulled out of the driveway. I saw him going down the driveway. As soon as he hit the 6th Street West and was looking south, he saw this. My cell phone rings. I just heard babbling on the other end. Chief, Chief, look south. Holy cow. Now, let me ask you, correct, definitive, decisive decisions. Do you think I had ever been to a hospital fire, a 5-story hospital fire that looked like that? What do you think? No, I had not. How many people on that first alarm assignment and the second alarm assignment and the third alarm assignment had ever been to a hospital fire that looked like that? 0. Now let me make sure this is even better for you. Is that just prior to this hospital fire starting, is the contracting crew who was there on site turned off the water to the sprinkler system and the standpipes and to most of the on-site hydrants. Yeah, I know. Does it get any worse? But I tell you what, high-risk, low-frequency decisions when there is no time. You think, how much time did we have on this fire to make decisions? No. Correct, decisive decision-making when there's no time requires training. Because you got to put a slide in your carousel. Maybe that slide doesn't look quite like that. But I tell you, what do you do if you train and a standpipe system is out of service? You lay your own water main into the building because training teaches you that. What happens when you pull up to an on-site hydrant and it's dry? Training tells me to call the second due unit and take a hydrant from the street. What does training tell you when a sprinkler system is out of service? You go find out why it's out of service and turn it on. Training tells you that. Nobody trains for a fire like that, but training tells you and teaches you the components of how to respond. So then when there is high risk, low frequency, is that high risk? Yeah. Is that low frequency? Thank God, yes. Was there time? No. Training is what helps you make correct, decisive decisions. Okay, now I always do this. I'm going to be a little bit sexist here, but I have a lecture for the guys. So ladies, close your ears. Correct, decisive decision making when there is time requires wise counsel. Guys, we have a genetic disorder. Ladies, you're listening because you're laughing. You're not supposed to be listening. We have a genetic disorder. And it is called, it's 3 letters. It's, oh, you ruined it. It is called ego. Because we suffer with that. Because when a decision is needed to be made, it's in our being that we don't ask anybody for input because we're the boss, right? How many of you are experts at HR decisions? Don't you dare raise your hand or I'll come over. I'll come find you. Yeah, none of us are. But you know, in organizations, we do have experts in HR. So if you are a manager and you have a complex HR situation that is facing you, correct, decisive decision making in a high risk, is HR decisions high risk? Are they low frequency? Complex ones are, thank God. You go seek help. You go seek somebody who's walked that road before. And oftentimes they'll tell you, oh, don't turn left. Don't turn left. Turn right instead. Correct, decisive decision making when there is time requires wise counsel. Teresa and I used to teach this to our kids ad nauseum. Anytime we mention fire rock to our grown kids now, they're 38, 35, and 34, it begins to generate a degree of nauseousness within them. But we used to teach them how to make decisions. It's facts, issues, rules and regulations, and biblical principles we used to teach our kids, options and conclusions. So oftentimes people I find have a decision-making process that is little more than taking a coin out of their pocket and flipping a coin and trying to figure it out that way. But if you already have a correct decision-making process that works for you, great. If you don't, think about this. So let's walk through this a little bit. Facts. Oftentimes I see that people who don't have the right facts before they make a decision will guarantee to screw it up. Then I see people who have the facts but don't understand the correct issue will also screw it up. Let me give you an example. So I'm an engine company captain. I pull up to a structure fire. It is going end to end, fire out all the windows. This thing is going to be a parking lot day after tomorrow. But it's a big fire. I got to put it out. You remember? Wet stuff on the red stuff. But there's a rest home next door. What's my issue? What's that? Yeah, structure protection. to keep the fire from going into the doggone rest home. That's the issue. The facts say I got a fire right in front of me, but the true issue is the rest home next door. So this is where when it comes to making decisions, you collect the facts that will help you make the correct assumption of what the true issue is. And then, oftentimes, there's regulations, there's laws, there's statutes, there's department policies that may address that specific issue. And so you follow the policies. Sometimes there may be an option. Maybe there's option 1, maybe there's option 2. And then you make a conclusion, maybe you make a decision. When it becomes assessing options, how do you assess the validity? Now, all the options are good, all the options are legal, all the options make sense. How do you determine which option is better? Give me some ideas. Input from somebody else, good. What else? What was that? Cost, another good one. What else? Past experience, good. Time, okay. What else? What was that? Pros and cons, okay. Ease of implementation, instinct. You can tell I'm looking for one, right? You can tell? Yeah. I haven't heard it yet. No, these are all good. These are all very, very important. But how about how it affects your people? Yeah. How it affects your people. Does that make labor happy? Yeah. Does that make management happy? Sure. As long as all the options that you had are correct to begin with, oftentimes you have a choice. And so this is FIROC, facts, issues, rules and regulations, options, and conclusions. If you have one, use it. If you don't, use this. Now, principled decision making. Let me give an example. Engine company, firefighter, CAP. I went to this burger place. They make the best hamburgers in the universe. CAP, not the city, not the world, in the universe. CAP, these things are so good, you can't believe it. CAP says, oh, you mean XYZ hamburgers? Yeah, that's a place. You been there? No, but I do know it's out of our district. Oh, come on, CAP. Come on. This is so good that we can certainly go out of district and just grab a quick hamburger and come back. And so the captain says, okay. And they end up getting a critical child with a critical asthmatic attack on the opposite side of their district. Let's talk about where that captain's decision-making process failed him or her. Principled decision-making in order. What is best for the people we are entrusted to serve? And in this context, I'm talking about the citizens in that engine company's captain's first-in district, because that engine company captain has a responsibility to serve and protect the citizens that are in their first-in district. Secondly, what is best for the organization that serves them. Thirdly, what is best for those that serve within the organization. Where did that captain go wrong in making a decision to go outside their district to XYZ hamburgers? What was that? They got number 3 up at number 1, right? The captain wanted to make his person happy, and they put number 3 above number 1 and 2. A critical failure. So again, this is try to give you some context on how to make good, decisive decisions. So how do you know when you're successful at applying this principle? Well, duh, when the decisions you're making are the right ones, and when your people trust and respect your decisions, even when they may not agree. Rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 5. 5, I get this. My people trust my decisions. I make good, correct, decisive decisions. I have a decision-making process. Whether I use FIROC, whether I use whatever, I have a good decision-making process. I understand that correct, decisive decisions are important. Rate yourself a 5. What the heck are you talking about? I've never heard this before. Rate yourself a 1. At least look down at your paper and make me think that you're writing something. Please assess yourself, a scale of 1 to 5. I had an opportunity to make a decision once where I was a deputy chief and our wildland division. We have a lot of heavy equipment in LA County Fire Department for wildland control. And one of the things they wanted to do is they oftentimes throughout the year would rent backhoes for projects. And so we had a budget of $25,000 to rent backhoes throughout the year. And we used it. It was well spent. And one of the folks brought a proposal to me, and he said, Chief, we've got the opportunity to purchase a brand new backhoe at a screaming deal for $75,000. I think it was $75,000. I had to say no. Why? Okay. Yeah. Sure. But let's face it, after 3 years, we'd have paid ourselves back. So at least in the 3 or 4 year perspective, this made really good financial sense. Why did I say no? What was my budget that year for backhoes? $25,000. So what I could have done, and I learned this from somebody else because I'm not that smart, is that what I could have done is take a red tip felt pen, and on this great proposal and on this great purchase requisition, I could have put denied and write it so hard that it rips through the paper and send it back to him. But I didn't, because I told him, here's why I have to say no, folks. This is great. This is an awesome idea. This makes perfect financial sense. But I only have got $25,000 in the budget this year. That's all I got. Okay, Chief, got it. What do you think they did? What was that? A payment plan, a lease payment option. They did a 3-year lease payment option, and were able to buy the backhoe for $25,000 a year for about 3.5 years, and interest and all that kind of stuff. And if I would just put denied on the paperwork, what do you think they would have done as far as creating an innovative solution? Say, Metro's a jerk. Yeah, exactly, okay? So again, when you're making correct, decisive decisions, part of the coaching process is to teach your people how you come to those decisions. So, important part. Correct, decisive decisions. How do you know? Hopefully you've rated yourself. The second trait of mental toughness is a leader must know when to change your mind. Now, I put this right next to principle number 1, correct, decisive decision making, because we're all a part of the human race, and none of us are perfect. There's only one man that walked this earth that was perfect, and sometimes we make mistakes. And so you need to have enough character that when you do make a mistake, you have courage to admit it. The humility to admit it and the courage to make it right. So a leader must know when to change their minds, because all of us will make mistakes. All of us. The people we lead will oftentimes know when we made the mistake before we do. Isn't that interesting? Your people will know you made a mistake sometimes before you realize it yourself. And it will generate an incredibly high degree of respect if, again, you have the humility to admit it and the courage to make it right. I never forget, I was giving this lecture at a place, I even forgot where it was now, and a person came up to me afterwards and said, Chief Metro, I really disagree with that concept about admitting your mistakes before the others that impacted your poor decision making. I have a problem with that. Because I believe if I admitted I made a mistake to my people, they'd lose respect for me. And I put on my dad voice. I says, young man, it's too late, because your people have already lost respect for you, because you failed to admit your own humanity. That's the real life, folks. And I tell you what, there's few things in life that will generate more respect than when you're humble enough to admit when you make one. So why? All of us will make a mistake. Your people will know it, and it generates a high degree of respect when you admit you made the mistake. So how do you do it? We already talked about this. Admit you made the mistake openly, especially to the people that it impacted. Analyze why you made the mistake, for goodness sakes, and I hope do what it takes to make it right and not make the same mistake again. So this is about getting back to the change in your pocket. So correct, decisive decision making, but understand that you will make a mistake. That is how you do it, but our pride will keep us from that. So how do you know when you're successful in applying this principle? When you figure out that you're not infallible. When you learn from your mistakes and stop making the same ones, for goodness sakes. When you find yourself analyzing bad decisions and looking for the reasons that caused you to make it. Rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 5. Okay, the third character, part of being mentally tough, is a leader focused on objectives, not just obstacles. I mentioned this during the earlier class earlier this afternoon. People who do nothing but focus on problems are what again? Whiners. Exactly. You know what? It is really easy to focus on nothing but problems because problems are all around us. That doesn't take any character. It doesn't take any innovation to complain about the problems that beset us. But what makes an amazing leader, instead of focusing on problems, you identify problems and instead focus on solutions. Absolutely. Because as I mentioned earlier today as well, people that whine about nothing but problems are a dime a dozen. You can scoop them up on a street corner. But those who identify problems and focus on solutions, they are worth $1 million. I'm going to read you this story. Okay, this is a test, actually. I want you to tell me who this person is. At the age of 52, this man was plagued by arthritis, diabetes, lost his bladder, and most of his thyroid gland. He had been a paper cup salesman, a real estate broker, a piano player, a milkshake mixer salesman who would always say, "The best is yet ahead of me." How'd you know that? It is Ray Kroc. What did Ray Kroc do? McDonald's, who was the largest retail food establishment in the world. Now they're number 2. But I tell you what, if there's any man who had reason to complain about the situation he found himself in life, it was Ray Kroc. But he didn't. He dealt with his problems, but he focused on solutions. Fred Smith, the founder of FedEx, was a student at Yale when he submitted a paper about the impact of a computerized society and the changes he envisioned for distribution and delivery systems. Smith's professor returned the paper, commenting that, the concept is interesting and well-formed, but in order to earn better than a C, this idea must be feasible. Yeah. I mean, FedEx can understand where a package is about this size, understand where it's at, what truck it's on, what driver is driving it, and when it's going to be delivered to your house. And you can go online and press in your FedEx number, and you can figure all that stuff out for yourself. And if this guy would have listened to his professor, holy cow. After one of news correspondent Katie Couric's early television appearances, the president of CNN told her he never wanted to see her on camera again. Tell you what, folks, these people kept their eye on the ball. They did not focus on problems. They focused on solutions. So, why? When we take our eyes off the problem, off the solutions, off the goal, we will sink. Identify problems, but so focus on solutions. The guy came on the job with, his name is Mike Ricker. He's retired now as well. And he had a firefighter that came to him. I was the division chief in Division 5 in the Antelope Valley. Mike was a fire captain at Station 24. One of his firefighters came to me and said, "Captain Ricker, I think you need to take this problem to Chief Metro. And I think you need to take this problem to Chief Metro and demand that he fix it." Mike kind of snickered. Him and I know each other pretty well. He says, "Really?" I said, "Yeah. Oh, true, a problem. How do you suppose fixing it?" Not really. How do you think we should fix it? I mean, obviously this is a problem. It's besetting how you operate, because I can tell you what Chief Metro is going to do. You're going to bring this problem to him, and he's going to ask you the same question I ask you. It's how do you propose fixing it? But you know what he did? He went back and he thought about it, and he brought back a good proposal to fix this problem. So understand that creating the right mindset within the organization where you function, especially within those people that report to you, is very, very important. Do not let people whine. Do not let people dump stuff on your feet and say, go fix it. Sometimes you may have to, but people have the ability to create solutions as well. You need to create the environment that stimulates that with an expectation that when you bring a problem to me, I expect you to bring a solution as well. Does that happen all the time? Is that possible to happen all the time? No, it's not. And what you don't want to do is tell people, don't bring a problem to me unless you have a solution. What you want to foster is say, bring a problem to me. And if you thought through it and you say, I just can't figure this thing out, that's the time to bring it to me. Because if you employ that don't bring a problem without a solution attached, then you'd be blinded to the problems of the organization. So I don't want you to take that too far. But the issue is, what I'm trying to say is you develop that mindset that gets you away from whining. So that's how you do it. Identify problems, but focus on solutions. See, I use these words specifically. Identify problems, focus on solutions, as opposed to focusing on problems. Know where your people need to go, have a plan, and work the plan. Yeah, this is pretty intuitive once you figure out the issue. Don't let obstacles destroy you. Oftentimes I see people saying, Chief, you know how this organization is. We can never do that. I hate that. I hate it. Ooh, this is a tough one, folks. How do you know when you are successful at applying this principle? Here's one of the consequences of leadership, is sometimes your leadership character may well be reflected in your people. When those people around you are talking about solutions, that's how you know you've accomplished that mindset. When those around you bring you problems with solutions attached. When your team stops complaining and whining so stinking much and starts being more positive. So oftentimes not oftentimes, in this case, assessing this character trait, I want you to think about how your people who are entrusted to your leadership act. Are they whining all the time? If they are, maybe that's merely a reflection of you. Tough stuff. Rate yourself, scale of 1 to 5. Okay. Now I want you to take your study guide, the handout, this document right here. I want you to close it for a second, turn it over. I don't want you to see the next page. Don't look, you're looking. Don't look, you're looking too. Don't look. This is a test question. All right. This is a survey of 13 items that was taken from surveys of hundreds of thousands of employees over the last 50 years through a leadership organization led by retired General William Cohen. Dr. Cohen is president of the Institute of Leader Arts, at least he was. He is a retired general from the U.S. Air Force, and after graduating from West Point, flew 174 combat missions in an A-26 aircraft in the Vietnam War. His military awards included the Distinguished Service Medal, the Legion of Merit, the Distinguished Flying Cross with 3 oak leaf clusters, and the Air Medal with 11 oak leaf clusters. He has held executive positions at McDonnell Douglas, Global Associates, and Sierra Engineering. He has a bachelor's from West Point, an MBA from the University of Chicago, an MA and a PhD in management from the Peter Drucker School of Management. Holy cow. This is a list of 13 questions. Issues. The question was, what really, as an employee, what motivates you? Now, this is a random list of the questions that he asked. What I want you to do is I want you to tell me what things would motivate you. What are the top 3 things that would motivate you? Think about that for a second. Okay, what do you think? Respect, okay? Interesting work. Recognition, end result. High pay. People who listen. Wow, what a novel concept. What was that? What else? Feeling well informed. Okay, you don't like being a mushroom, huh? What else? 14? Opportunity. Got it. Okay. Yeah. Good. Interesting. Interesting that only one person mentioned high pay. Nobody mentioned good benefits. All of you are kind of obscure. I mean, it really wasn't about what it's in for you. I mean, you want thank yous. You want recognition. You want to be well informed. All these things you think are important. You're really a weird group because none of you mentioned high pay. Okay, do you want to see what the correct order of the survey was? The exact same order. The exact same order. This is what Dr. Cohen found out, that people, if you want to really motivate them, that you work with people and you treat them with respect. Really? Interesting work, recognition for good work, opportunities to develop skills. These are the things that motivate people to act. And if you want to motivate your team, do this stuff. Now let me give you an example about high pay. Is high pay important? Yes, it is. And I'll never forget this. A great character lesson for me is Teresa and I had been married for about probably 10 years. I was a paramedic for a couple of years. And back in those days, my kids, my two boys, who were both paramedics, he says, Dad, you were a paramedic back when the heart still had 2 chambers. I know, not right. Not right. My oldest boy, Ryan, gave me a picture of 18th century firefighters fighting a fire with a steam engine. He says, look, Dad, your first fire. I know, not right. But when I was a young paramedic, we used to get, I think it was $15 a shift as a bonus for being a paramedic. Teresa and I, we had 3 small kids. I went to a union meeting, and the union had negotiated a 17% bonus for being a paramedic. I called Teresa and says, oh, honey, we can buy groceries. We're in the money. And I'll never forget, at that time, we used to have to draft firefighters into paramedic training. What that means is you grab them by the hair and we drag them out of the blue chairs and throw them into paramedic training whether they liked it or didn't like it. And in that union meeting, when they announced that tremendous paramedic bonus, I said, this will be the last time we will ever have to draft firefighters into paramedic training. How do you think that worked out for me? 100% wrong. See, you're like me. Yeah, no kidding. We continued to have to draft firefighters into paramedic training because this really played this out well because high pay isn't all that motivates people to act. Part of it, absolutely. But I tell you what, treating people with respect, giving them an interesting work, recognition for good work. For those of you in the management class, recognition of good work was part of people, process, or strategy. People, exactly. It was part of the first pillar of management, the people pillar. So you want to develop an effective team, pay attention to this stuff. So the character traits of building a team. This is the second cluster of character traits I want to spend a little bit of time on. So a leader must believe in the creative value of people, able to communicate, example, loyalty, empathy for those entrusted to your leadership. Let's break this down and talk about them. The leader must believe in the creative value of people. Catch up to my notes here. I'll read you a story. Who is J. Paul Getty? You've heard the story before, I can tell. Some museum owner, yeah. How did J. Paul Getty earn his billions of dollars? Oil, exactly. Now, when he was a young man, actually he wasn't in Texas. He was in Seal Beach, in Long Beach. That's where he started off. J. Paul Getty, who at one time was referred to as the wealthiest man in the world, made most of his fortune in the oil business. But in the early years of his career, when he first started off, he owned a 72 square foot parcel of land in the middle of an oil field in Seal Beach, California. It was not long before his fellow businessmen referred to a small plot of his land as Getty's turnip patch, and they were laughing at him. 72 square feet, people, your walk-in closets are bigger than 72 square feet, most of you. But he had a dream, and he refused to focus on problems, and he went to focus on solutions. But J. Paul Getty believed in the creative value of people who were doing the job. And J. Paul Getty, he never drilled for oil before. He knew everybody else was. He knew they were being successful, but he had no idea how to do it. So J. Paul Getty met with a drilling crew. It was a ragtag band of oil drillers, and he told them the situation. 72 square feet, it wouldn't even fit a modern-sized oil derrick. So he asked them if they had any ideas, because he was all ears. Before long, this ragtag band of oil drillers came up with an idea of building a miniature oil derrick to fit on the miniature piece of property. But then they discovered that the easement to J. Paul Getty's 72 square foot turnip patch was only 4 feet wide. And the trucks of the day were a lot bigger than 4 feet wide. And J. Paul Getty's competitors reminded him, don't you dare put even a tire track on our property outside of your easement. So J. Paul Getty went back to his ragtag band of oil drillers. He explained the problem, and they went back and came and designed a miniature railroad that carried his miniature oil derrick up to his miniature piece of property, and he drilled for oil, and the rest is history. Isn't that amazing? And if J. Paul Getty hadn't have relied upon the creative value of his people, he'd been working for Ray Kroc at McDonald's. This is reality, that you got to believe in the creative value of your people. So how do you do it? This is why, by using the creative value of people, you will be amazed at the solution to problems and the improvement of processes that will be developed. So how do you do it? I tell you what. First off, you select the right people that focus on nothing but problems. You go find all your whiners, right? No, just shoot me. Don't do that. What you do is you focus on your people, or you select your people who don't have who have the courage to identify problems, but the integrity and character to understand what solutions are. Those are the people you go find. And you put them on these creative teams. And understand that solutions will come from the synergy of the group. Don't kill it. Let me give you an example. I was an assistant chief in Antelope Valley again, and we created this Emergency Medical Services Quality Improvement Committee. In our very first meeting, I asked the question, what do you think is broke? Do you think I had a lack of input? Oh, no. I had no lack of input at all. And one of the guys raised his hand. He says, Chief, we run some really busy paramedic units here, and invariably, especially on weekends, we run out of the allotted amount of morphine because we use it for chest pain, we use it for pain control, we use it for all kinds of stuff. The EMS agency limits us to 60 milligrams of morphine. We have it in 10 milligram vials. That means we only have 6 applications of morphine. And on a busy weekend with all the stuff that we have going on, we'll go through all six injectors of morphine, and then we have to call the paramedic coordinator, and he has to drive up to the Antelope Valley. He has to pick up our paperwork. Then he has to drive down to USC. He has to pick up additional medications and drugs on Saturday, and then drive back up to Antelope Valley. And then, you understand when you drive from USC to Antelope Valley, you cross a time zone, right? So, and then he has to give the medication and drive home. And he says, Chief, this is a stupid idea. I said, boy, you're exactly right. How do you propose to fix it? Because I thought, okay, I've been the chief of EMS. I can fix this problem. I will just go to the Los Angeles County Department of Health Services, and I'll pound my fist on the table, and I'll say, you must give us more than 60 milligrams of morphine. And this young man, firefighter paramedic Kyle Boyd, raised his hand. He says, yeah, Kyle. He says, Chief, rarely do we ever use 10 milligrams of morphine. Why don't we use 4 milligrams of morphine in our injectables? And that way we go from 6 applications of morphine to 15. And if we need more than 4, we just give 2 4 milligram vials of morphine for a total of 8. Now, if I would have told Kyle, do you understand that I'd have to go to the Department of Health Services, and I'd have to convince them to change their packaging for morphine? Kyle, this is a dumb idea. Next. That'd have been about the last idea that Kyle ever would have given me. But I tell you what, the idea makes sense. And we went to the local pharmacies, or the DHS pharmacies, and they gave us, yeah, we already have 4 milligram vials of morphine. We can order it that way. So we ran a pilot program in the Antelope Valley, 15 applications of morphine at 4 milligrams apiece, and it became a model in the Antelope, it became a model for the department. All because a firefighter paramedic, Kyle Boyd, had a good idea that was a whole lot better than mine. Because mine was kind of dumb. But Kyle's was great. Another idea, firefighter paramedic Sanford Hoffman. He says, Chief, at that time we didn't have any trauma centers in the Antelope Valley, so all of our trauma patients had to be loaded in a helicopter and taken to a trauma center back down in the basin. And any equipment that we put on that person, traction splints, backboards, all this kind of stuff, we were convinced that once he got in that helicopter and they took him to the hospital, there was a deep, dark black hole somewhere in that hospital. They took all of our equipment to and they dropped it down, never to be seen again. And we were spending a ton of money on replacing equipment. So Sanford Hoffman said, Chief, would you allow me to follow our patients from when we first lay hands on them all the way to the hospital emergency room and wherever they go after that and try to figure out what's going on? I said, sure, Kyle, give it a chance and see what happens. And so we did. And what he found is when our patients arrived at the trauma center, they'd go to the emergency room, assessed by the doctor, and then go to surgery. And so they go to surgery, and they would take all of our equipment off, and they would throw it in a corner. The patient would be fixed, off to the room, and then maintenance would come by. They're the ones that threw it in the deep, dark hole. Because someone would be coming by, and they'd look at that and say, yuck, and drop it in that deep, dark black hole. Because they didn't know what else to do with it. So Sanford said, Chief, can we spend a few dollars, and I'd like to get the most obnoxious color fluorescent green tags you've ever seen in your life. I'd like to laminate them, and on that tag it would say, if you find this, please call Fire Station 24 at area code 661-274-2900. And then turn it over, or first off, I'm sorry, the first part of it said, please send to the emergency room. The backside said, please call Fire Station 24. And so this way, when maintenance came by, they looked at this big green tag, says, oh, send it to the emergency room. That solved my problem, makes it theirs. Went to the emergency room. They got down there, they looked at it and said, Fire Station 24, we have your traction splint here. It's a mess, come get it. Guess what? We stopped losing stuff because firefighter paramedic Kyle Boyd had a great idea. So the point of this is believe in the creative value of your people. And when you sit down and have these synergistic problem-solving meetings, as long as you stay out of it, I'm not saying you shouldn't attend, you should, but support it. But don't say, that's a dumb idea, I don't like that, that'll never work. Don't do that, because it'll kill the synergy of the meeting. And this is amazing. Make the progress during the meeting, make it visible on a whiteboard. I don't know what it is about a whiteboard, folks. It is flippin' magical. So put the ideas on a whiteboard so people can see them and begin to think through this stuff. So this is how. Select the right people. Understand that the synergy of the group will come from the group itself. Don't kill it. Use a whiteboard. How do you know when you're successful at applying this principle? When you stop thinking that you have all the answers because you're the boss, when you start having these problem-solving synergy meetings and sit back and smile at the solutions that'll come from the effort of a creative group as long as you trust them. Rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 5. 5, I see this in my career. I'm doing this stuff. 1, never did that before. And I suspect many of you will probably say, I never did that before. So rate yourself a 1. Okay. Excuse me. Next character trait of building a team is you must have the ability to communicate. This may scare some of you. I'm not talking about the ability to speak in front of a large group. I'm not talking about the ability to create speeches and be some kind of an orator. I'm not talking about that. But I tell you what, if you want to impart vision, if you want to impart excitement to your team, you have to be able to communicate that kind of stuff to them. And one of the first things you can do is stop being negative, for goodness sakes. Oh yeah, the department's all screwed up. Yeah, this will never get fixed. You know the organization. A bunch of idiots run it. You know, that's communicating, but in a horrible way, because it'll destroy the synergy of your group. So you have to be able to communicate in a positive way. The effectiveness of your team will be dictated by your ability to communicate. Your team will not find the best possible solutions to issues without effective communications. Let me give you an example. Communication is very difficult to list people. Okay, I'm going to ask you a question. I want you to be very honest. I want you to raise your hands proudly if you are this kind of a person. Proudly in the air, wave your hand back and forth if you are a dedicated list person. Oh, don't make me walk over there. I am a dedicated list person. I don't care what kind of list. It's you live by list. Because if you're a list person, there's some liars in this room, I know there is. If you are a list person, what makes your day? Crossing it off, yeah. Oh, I got this wonderful thing. It's called Wonderlist. It's an app on my iPad. And it's a list of things I have to do. And when I put my finger in the box that puts a check there, it goes ding. Oh, that's good. That's good. I'm a list person. But tell you what, when it comes to communications, communicating is not good for list people. Because it's hard to put a task on our list that says we've communicated. You can't feel it, you can't measure it, you can't get your fingers into it. So those of us who are list people either will push it off our list, or because we can't put a check by it, it won't go on our list. But let me tell you the danger of that. It's like changing oil in your car. If you miss the first 3,000 or 5,000 time to change your oil, you're going to see something bad happen right away? No. Second time you miss your oil change, something bad had happened right away? No. But eventually, you're going to find yourself on the side of the road with the hood open on your car saying, wow, I really wish I'd have changed my oil. Communication is a lot like that, folks. Is that if you don't communicate with your team, at least effectively, it won't show up immediately, but I guarantee you, your organizational vehicle will find itself stranded on the side of the road with its hood up saying, I wish I would have communicated. Because if you don't communicate with your team, there will be created a vacuum of communication. Physics tells us that all vacuums desire to be filled, right? And so if you have a vacuum of communication, what will it be filled with? What was that? Rumors, yeah. Rumors, whiners. Yeah, it'll be filled, trust me. You just don't like what it gets filled with. So you got to communicate with your team. So why? Effective communication is the first step to imparting vision to get people excited. The effectiveness of your team will be in part dictated by your ability to communicate, and your team will not find the best possible solutions without you being able to communicate and empowering your people to make that happen. That's why. How do you do it? You, as a leader, must personalize the vision. You, as a leader, must make your people see what can be. When we created the Division 5 Quality Improvement Committee, I knew there would be some things that would take a long time to fix. But yet I also knew, hoped, figured out that there'd be a lot of low-hanging fruit. So what do you think I went for first? Low-hanging fruit. Why? What was that? Baby step, in part, yeah. See progress. And when people see progress, what do? They get excited. Especially as big of an organization that I used to be part of. Because you get to the point that you say, we're so stinking big we can't change. But when a person like firefighter and paramedic Kyle Boyd, or firefighter paramedic Sanford Hoffman, can say, wow, I made a change. That's what excites people. So when you do something like this, pick the low-hanging fruit first. And once they saw that happen, once they saw that they could make a change, it incited the rest of them to action and take on bigger projects. So that's how. But you, as a leader, must be able to make them or to convince them that they can change the future. And that was one of the biggest problems I had. Chief, really, you think we're going to change? From the bottom of my heart, I think we can change. And a lot of it is going to be dependent upon us and how we work together as a team. Are you up for it? And then go after the low-hanging fruit. So that's how. How do you know when you're successful? This is one of those things that you have to look into the mirror to assess yourself. Understand how effectively you communicate is determined by your people, not by you. Meaningful, excellent solutions are developed for the refining process of open, honest communication. When your team achieves clarity and buy-in on issues and the solutions, when they stop being negative, when they become positive, when they become excited, and they start looking for the future. See, your effectiveness in communication and what you put down on your paper here in a second is going to be to a great deal determined by what you see in the mirror when you look in your people, when you look in your team. Rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 5. What you see in your team. Next one. The next character trait in the cluster of building a team is a leader must be an example. Folks, this is one of the hardest ones. You are an example. You're an example because of who you work for. You're an example because you're a leader. You're an example. But you're also an example 24/7. You're an example to your families, to your community, to your neighborhood, to your organization. You are an example. You're an example because you are. You're an example because your team is watching you. And oh, trust me, your team is watching you all the time. Never forget, as a young, cocky paramedic, I was on Squad 39 working in the ghetto. Engine 54, Captain Smokey Bauman. Smokey Bauman was a Marine Corps drill sergeant before he came on the fire department. And I'll never forget one of the first runs I went on in Engine 54's 1st in District on Squad 39. We took care of the patient. They were taken to the hospital. Smokey Bauman walked up to me and he said, "Metro, I want you to step to the front of my fire engine. I want to talk to you." And my partner said, "Oh, crap." Metro's in trouble. And Smokey Bauman took me to the front of his fire station, and he said, or his fire engine. He says, "I want to tell you right now, the people in Engine 54's district are my people. And I want you to treat them with respect. When you come into my 1st in district, your shoes will be shined. The zippers on your boots will be up. You will not be wearing a baseball cap. If you wear a jacket, it'll be legal and be zipped up. Otherwise, you'll be in your uniform." Got it? Yes, sir. If we went into another jurisdiction whose captains were lazy and lackadaisical, they could have cared less what I looked like. Smokey Bauman, those were his people. And the thing is, because he was such an example, I remember, he says, "I want your shoes to be shined." I looked down at his shoes and they about blinded me. He says, "I want you to be in a good squared away looking uniform." I looked at his uniform, it was good and squared away. Smokey Bauman was an example. And you know what? When he told me that, and it was pretty strict, I was okay with that. Because he was an example. And so if you're going to teach your people, make sure that you act as least as equal or better than the expectation you have for them. Everything a leader does now sets up what you do later, and there's always be a later. How an leader act oftentimes will dictate how their teams will act. When I was a assistant chief, we had a problem with a firefighter. He was on an engine company. The guy responded to a smoke in the area call. The engine went down this one street. There was a group of people in the front yard. None of the people waved them down. The engine company kept on going. They realized it was in the 100 block of, so he says, "Well, it must be where those people are at." They turned around, came back. The firefighter got off the rig, walked up those people, and say, "What in the F is wrong with you? Why didn't you raise your hand and wave us down?" So a battalion chief came into my office. "Chief Metro, got a problem." Here's what he said. "Really? Okay. Battalion chief, you go deal with the firefighter. I want his captain." "Oh, Chief Metro, you're overacting again." He didn't quite say it that way. "But his captain wasn't even on duty that day." "Don't care. I want his captain." Because do you think this guy woke up one day and says, "Today I'm going to drop the F-bomb in front of a bunch of people in the community"? No. This is a gradual process where that captain allowed a little bit of disrespect, which grew into a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, until he thought it was okay to walk up to a group of people and drop the F-bomb. I held his captain responsible for that, along with him too. Oh, it sent shockwaves through the division. Captain's responsible? Yeah. So this is the kind of mindset that you need to develop as well. That leadership is important. Leadership is about being an example. Leadership is about being responsible for your people. I want to read you a story about being an example. Two stories, actually, two independent stories. In the early 1900s, Al Capone virtually owned Chicago. Capone was not famous for anything heroic. He was notorious for entangling the Windy City in everything from bootleg booze to prostitution to murder. Capone had a lawyer by the name of Easy Eddie, and he was Capone's lawyer for good reason because he kept Capone out of jail. And to show his appreciation, Capone paid Easy Eddie very well. In fact, Easy Eddie lived in a mansion that his property was so big it covered almost an entire city block. Now, in order to be successful in the mob, Easy Eddie had to be tough, and he was tough. But Easy Eddie had a soft spot in his heart, and that was for his son. Now, Easy Eddie could buy his son anything in the world that his son's heart desired except two things: a good name and a good example. Now, that haunted Easy Eddie for a number of years until it finally became overwhelming. And Easy Eddie wanted to become that kind of example for his son that he always dreamed of being. So Easy Eddie went to the authorities and he told the story about Al Scarface Capone. About a year later, Easy Eddie was killed in a hail of gunfire on a lonely downtown street. Sometimes being an example can have consequences. Now, fast forward a couple of decades later to World War II, which produced many such heroes. One such man was Lieutenant Commander Butch O'Hare. He was a fighter pilot assigned to the aircraft carrier Lexington in the South Pacific. One day, his entire squadron was sent on a mission, and after he was airborne, Lieutenant Commander Butch O'Hare looked at his fuel gauge and realized that someone had forgot to top off his tank. He would not have enough fuel to complete his mission. His flight leader told him to go back to the carrier, and reluctantly he pulled out of formation and headed back to the fleet. As he was returning to the carrier group, he saw something that made his blood run cold. An entire squadron of Japanese aircraft was heading to now nearly defenseless American fleet. He decided there was only one thing he could do, and with the sun to his tail to his back, he dove into the formation of Japanese fighter planes, firing his .50 caliber machine gun until all the ammunition was gone. And then when it was gone, he began to fly at the airplanes, clipping their wings, rendering them unable to fly. And finally, with all chance of surprise now gone, the Japanese squadron turned back to their home base. Lieutenant Commander Butch O'Hare landed what was left of his fighter plane on the carrier deck of the Lexington. And although he told his story, his fuselage-mounted camera told even more. For that, Lieutenant Commander Butch O'Hare was awarded the Navy Cross and the Congressional Medal of Honor. A year later, he was killed in aerial combat at the age of 29. His hometown allowed the memory of this World War II hero to fade away, and so today, O'Hare International Airport is named in his honor. And in fact, if you go there, you used to be able to see his Medal of Honor on display. You can see a replica of his airplane and a bust of Lieutenant Commander Butch O'Hare. Amazing story of an example that people can look at and say, I want to be like that person. But the most amazing part of that story is Lieutenant Commander Butch O'Hare was Easy Eddie's son. Ladies and gentlemen, don't you ever forget the power of an example to your family, to your community, to your neighborhood, to your organization. You are an example. For that, you have no choice. The only choice you have is whether you're a good example or a bad one. That's your choice. How do you do it? Have a positive attitude. Have courage. Desire to do the right stuff. Demonstrate a zeal for the mission. Provide a glimpse of what the future can be. This is just components of how you should be an example. And again, it's the toughest one because it's 24/7. Because sometimes being an example has consequences. Sometimes doing the right thing has consequences. Sometimes saying no has consequences. Sometimes having integrity and character have consequences. But you are an example. For that, you have no choice. That's how you are. How do you know when you're successful? This is, again, in part determined by the reflection of you, or the reflection of your team, that they see in you. When those around you are optimistic, when those around you are hopeful, when people around you are following you because they want to. Never, ever, ever, ever compromise your integrity. Don't you dare expect your people to work any harder than you do. Don't you dare expect your people to dress any better than you do. Don't you dare expect your people to treat your customers any better than you do. Just like Smokey Bauman. I had no problem with Smokey being strict because he was that example to me. You are that example to your people that are entrusted to your leadership. Rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 5. Next character trait in the cluster of building a team is a leader must be able to cultivate loyalty. Loyalty is a virtue, people. Loyalty ought to be respected and maintained. But I tell you what, loyalty, sometimes we get it screwed up. And let me give you a story about how I got it screwed up. Loyalty is more about being loyal to a person. Loyalty is about being responsible and loyal to a mission as well. And I tell you, when I was a paramedic, I loved being a paramedic. But I worked in some pretty tough areas, and we were really, really busy. And sometimes as a means of creating this emotional wall between us and the tragedies we sometimes saw, our runs became numbers to us. And oftentimes, exchange of shift in the morning, oftentimes we'll say, hey, how many runs you go on? Oh, 30. Oh, wow. How many after midnight? 7. Oh, you got your butt kicked. How many fires? 3. And so it all became numbers. It wasn't about the people any longer. And I'll never forget is one day we ran on run number 16, a 7-year-old girl who had asthma, really bad. And so we did what we do for children with asthma. We gave them medications, we took her to the hospital, established IVs, do all that stuff. And then we run number 16 and 17 and 18. And I never forget, the next day, Teresa and I were shopping for groceries, and a little girl tugged on my shirt, and I looked down, and sure enough, it was the girl we rolled on the night before, a 7-year-old girl, run number 15. And I bent down, and she wrapped her arms around my neck, and she said, thank you for saving my life. And I looked up, and her parents were tearing up, and Teresa was tearing up, and I had something in my eye. But it changed me forever. Because no longer was she number 15. She was a 7-year-old girl who had a face and a family that loved her and a life ahead of her. Changed me forever. And after I became a chief officer, I began to put on the bottom of all my stationery, making a difference one life at a time. And somebody came up to me and says, Chief, do you put that on your stationery to remind us of what we're supposed to be doing? I says, no. Just remind me. See, we have an incredible mission, folks. But we have to be loyal to the right thing. And I found that because of the hardness I was developing in my heart, I was not loyal to the right thing. And I need to be loyal to the people who entrusted their lives to our organization, as you need to be loyal to your mission and your customers and the lives that oftentimes hang in the precipice because of how you enforce the rules and the regulations of what you do every day. Loyalty for your team builds trust. Loyalty to the team required to achieve results. Loyalty believes or leads to commitment. I have worked with a number of chief officers who I was convinced had no more loyalty to me than the man in the moon. And they would throw me under the bus the first chance they got the opportunity to, if it would further their career, or if it would take away from the blame that they should have accepted. Most of us have worked for people like that. So you have to be loyal to the people who are entrusted to you. You have to understand that. How do you do it? Understand that authentic loyalty is not blind devotion to man. It's first allegiance to truth and duty. Allegiance to truth and duty. See, that's why that list of 13 was so important, because it wasn't about allegiance to money. It was allegiance to truth and duty and the responsibilities and the emotional gratification we get from our jobs. That's what's so cool about that survey. How do you know when you're successful at applying this principle about being loyal? When relationships matter to you. When relationships matter to you. I'll never forget Division Chief John McIntyre, who was in charge of the Information Management Division for Los Angeles County Fire Department. I was a captain assigned to him, and I'd made a mistake the day before. It wasn't a purposeful one. It wasn't one that had any malice attached to it, but it was a mistake. And that next morning, I expected to hear on the loudspeaker, "Metro to my office." But John McIntyre walked to my office. John McIntyre sat across from my desk in the seat that mostly guests sat in. And John McIntyre began to teach me how and why I made the mistake. He didn't beat me around the head. He taught me how I could become a better leader. See, there's a lot of people that made a difference in my life. It wasn't just about me. It was about people like John McIntyre and Wendy Taunton and Leon Provost, and a number of other people who invested in me. You need to invest in your people as well and be loyal to the right stuff. When your people get sick, when your people make mistakes, how do you handle that? Do you handle like John McIntyre did to me? Thank God John McIntyre handled it that way. When your people are sick, do you visit them in a hospital? When a baby dies, do you go to their funeral? Do you have any idea what that means to people when you do that as a leader? Especially when your heart draws you to do it. Because then people will be able to palpate your loyalty and commitment to them. And that is worth more than I can ever imagine. Loyalty to the right stuff, folks. So how do you know when you're applying it? It's where you get to rate yourself. When relationships matter, when your people matter to you. When you're striving to be as trustworthy an individual within your team as you expect others to be as well. Rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 to 5. Okay. I tell you, part of being a team is a leader has to have empathy for each other, for the team that's being entrusted to you as well. I want to read you a story. Bad Times, Good Leadership, a story of Howard Schultz. Who's Howard Schultz? I'm looking for Starbucks coffee cups here. Howard Schultz developed Starbucks. Story of Howard Schultz, CEO of Starbucks, when 3 of his employees were murdered while working in a Georgetown neighborhood of Washington, D.C. He, the CEO of Starbucks, left his vacation and flew straight to Washington himself. He did not send a deputy, he went himself. Schultz handled the major activities, both internal and external, himself. He spoke to the media, he attended and spoke at the memorial services. He announced that the store would reopen and donate all future net profits to an anti-violence organization. And he said, quote, "We stand here powerless to reverse this tragedy of last week," he said. "But by dedicating the remodeled store in their honor and by contributing all future net profits from the sales of this Georgetown store, we will keep their spirits alive." Did George Schultz know these 3 people who were murdered? No, he didn't. Did he care about them? Obviously, because he went away from his vacation to be there. So you got to have empathy for your people in the bad times and the good times. You got to have empathy for people when they make a mistake. You got to have empathy for the people when they run into life's hardships. So why? You cannot care about people without caring about their struggles. And you can't kick them to the curb when they make a mistake. You got to have empathy for them. Now, there are people that make mistakes that are vindictive, and that's a different kind of people, and that's a small priority, or a small minority. But the thing is people make mistakes all the time, and you cannot kick them to the curb. Your job as a leader is to coach and mentor like John McIntyre did to me, because it'll only be a matter of time before you make a mistake, and then your people will treat you like you treat them. So you got to have empathy for the people who are entrusted to your leadership when they make mistakes and when they suffer life's hardships. How do you do it? Make sure you help people up when they fail as opposed to kicking them when they're down. Give people encouragement when they struggle rather than scorn. Build people up when they fail if you're truly interested in their well-being and improvement. That's how you do it. How do you know when you're successful applying this principle? When you care about your team's hardships. When you handle failure as an opportunity for people to learn. when you understand it's only a matter of time before you fail, and when you see people learn from their failures. Again, this is one of those leadership characters that is going to be reflected. Your ability is going to be reflected in your team's behavior. Rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 5. Okay, last two. These two character traits, remember the first couple of character traits revolved around mental toughness. The second group of character traits was about building a team. These specific character traits are really pointed at you and how to help you be more successful. A leader must be visionary. A leader must be disciplined. We're going to talk about those two things as we finish up. So, be visionary. Why? Because vision is a picture of the future that inspires people to act. Because vision is contagious. Because people thrive on vision. Let me read you, and again, you have to be a communicator to inspire vision, but you don't have to be an orator. You don't have to be able to make big speeches. You don't have to be none of that stuff. But you got to keep it simple. Let me read you some inspiring comments that were simple. John Adams in 1774 boldly declared his vision for a new nation, a union of 13 states independent from the Parliament and the King of England. Against great odds, his words came true, and 2 years later, the United States of America was born. In the early 20th century, a dynamic industrialist named Henry Ford stood in front of his ragtag band of employees, and he vowed to make automobile transportation affordable for the average American family. The nation laughed out loud at him. But barely 15 years later, millions of Ford Model T automobiles have been bought and sold at a cost of just $290 each. Simple words, December 7th, 1941, a day that'll live with infamy. Franklin Delano Roosevelt spoke these words and led a nation to conquer tyranny and caused kids that were 15 years of age to lie about their age to go serve their great nation and fight against the threat of their nation being taken away from them. I remember this one. In 1962, John F. Kennedy announced to the nation that we would send men to the moon. For many, it caused us to start looking up at the stars. It certainly did me. And not 6 years later, Neil Armstrong spoke these words, "One small step for man, a giant leap for mankind," as he stepped upon the face of the moon. Now, these are simple statements, but they inspired a nation. I'm not looking to you to inspire a nation. I'm looking to you for inspire the people that are entrusted to your leadership. But the point I'm trying to make is it's not about writing speeches. It's not about being some crazy orator. It's just about communicating and about communicating vision. So how do you do it? Understand, first off, again, vision is contagious, but so is negativity. And negativity and moaning and whining, unfortunately, is a whole lot more contagious than positive attitude is. That's why you have to work so hard at it. So being a visionary, because it is contagious, painting a picture of what the future can be. People love that. How do you do it? You keep it simple. By painting a vivid word picture of what the future could be. Kyle Boyd, if this works, can you imagine the problems you're going to solve for the LA County Fire Department here in Division 5? Chief, it kind of scares me to think about it. But Kyle Boyd did it. And so did Sanford Hoffman. So impart it to your leadership team, communicate it one-on-one, communicate it in group settings, follow up and monitor for vision leakage. Vision leakage is oftentimes when a leader begins to talk about a vision, and because you don't continue to communicate, people lose the feel of vision. They lose the excitement. And so you have to continue to talk about it. This is why one of the character traits of building a team is about communicating. That's why one of the reasons why that is so important. So follow up and monitor vision leakage and make sure that vision leads to achievement. Let me read you this because this is something very significant. Vision is oftentimes a lot easier to project than accomplishing the vision. Vision without passion is just talk. Passion without commitment is a waste of time, and commitment without action is nothing more than a lie. Read that again. Vision without passion is just talk. Passion without commitment is a waste of time, and commitment without action is nothing but a lie. That's how you do it. How do you know when you're successful? When your people, again, now you're looking at your rating based upon what your people are looking like. When your people are excited, when your people are moving forward to action, and when it focuses your people. Rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 5. A leader must be disciplined. The final character trait of the day. Because no one achieves and sustains any degree of success without discipline. Because talent without discipline is like an octopus on roller skates. It's going in a whole bunch of different directions. You just don't know which one it's going in. So discipline is very, very important. Now, I'm talking directly to you as individuals now. This is not necessarily a reflection of your team. It's about you. And you've got to be disciplined if you're going to be successful. And again, going back to us as list people, being disciplined, oftentimes we migrate ourselves to our definition of success is defined at the end of the day by what? How many things you crossed off our list? How many check boxes we put on there? What does that cause us to do if we're dedicated list people? Get anxious, but we migrate to the easy stuff. We migrate to the things that allow us to put the most check boxes at the end of the day. And sometimes what we'll do is we shy away from the tougher things. We shy away from the things that take more time because we may only be able to put 1 check in the box at the end of the day rather than 6. And this is dangerous for list people. So we've got to be focused on the right stuff. Now let me talk about being focused on the right stuff. It can not be better characterized than the story of Eastern Airlines 401. On approach from New York to Miami, a light that indicates proper deployment of the landing gear failed to light. The plane flew in large circles over the Florida Everglades with a full load of passengers. The crew was trying to determine if the bulb was bad or the gear was not locked. When the flight engineer tried to remove the bulb, it would not budge, and so other members of the crew tried to help him. As they struggled with the bulb, the plane simply flew into the swamp. Dozens of people were killed. With a high-priced professional crew, they fiddled a 75-cent light bulb while the plane with passengers merely flew into the ground. Now that's a rather significant over-the-edge example. But it is an example, nonetheless, that we've got to be focused on the right stuff. And there's a danger to us as list people. So how do you do it? You do the right things for the right reasons. You got to have a plan, folks. We talked about this earlier today in the people, process, and strategy. You got to have a strategic plan that it runs with your section or your division. You got to understand what's really important. You got to operate by principle instead of emotion. You got to use some kind of an organizing tool because there is way too much stuff that flies through our desk without you having some sort of organizing tool to keep track of it. I'm not that smart to remember stuff, but the computer certainly is. So you got to have a plan, and you got to be disciplined. You got to be focusing on more than 5 o'clock this afternoon. Let me tell you a danger, especially in the budget crunches that we've experienced, is oftentimes we've been forced to wear multiple hats. And sometimes we get to the end of the day and say, dear God, just get me past 5 o'clock. Tomorrow, it's going to take care of itself. I just want to get to 5 o'clock today. That is dangerous. Let me give you an example. My dad was teaching me to drive a car. I was 15 and a half. My family had a 1963 Mercury Monterey. Now, this was a tuna boat. It was a huge car. And I was convinced sitting behind the steering wheel of this car that the distance between the front of the windshield and the front bumper was about 45 feet. This was a huge car. And my tendency was to grab that wheel, my dad was sitting to my right, and to look directly what's in front of the car. And I drove like this. And what I did is I began to swerve in the lane. And I never forget, my dad says, Mike, you got to raise your eyes, and you got to focus on what's down the road. When I finally got it through my thick skull, listened to my dad, I began to focus on what's down the road. And guess what happened? I stopped swerving. And then my dad taught me to read street signs. And then my dad taught me to read maps. So then I could begin to see what wasn't evident in front of my front windshield. And I began to drive straighter and plan. And a lot of that is we got to begin as leaders, think past 5 o'clock today. We got to be thinking down the road, folks, like my dad taught me. We got to be thinking down the road. So, how do you know when you're being disciplined? This is going to be another class as well. When you have a plan and stick to it. When you understand the weaknesses of being a list person and don't migrate to the simple things that allow you to put more checks in the box at the end of the day. When you begin to use a planner or some kind of a tool to stay focused in the future and not just 5 o'clock this afternoon. That's how you know when you're applying this principle successfully. Rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 5. About out of time, and we're about done. But again, the 3 C's of leadership are, first one, character. Second one, competence. Third one, connection. Okay, so remember I talked to you, we're not going to talk about competence today because the competences, we have so many different people, different jobs in here. The competencies is all over the board. We're not going to talk about the second C, but it is important because if you're not competent in your profession, but yet you're a great leader, you'll be nothing more than a nice person. Yeah, exactly. And the third C, connection to those who have been entrusted to your leadership. If you paid attention to what we're talking about, when we talked about believing the creative value of people, we talked about having empathy for people that have been entrusted to your leadership. We talk about communicating to your people. You'll begin to develop the connection to those who have been trusted to you if you follow these principles we've talked about today. The third C is connection. It's incredibly, incredibly important because you got to be connected to the people who have been entrusted to you. How? Be truly interested in others. Smile, be a good listener, care about people. This is not hard to do. Spend time with your team. And again, this is more applicable to, to the red lights and siren part of the organization. But how good are you? What really matters to the customers that are you responsible to? What matters to them? Sarasota County, Florida, ask their patients, ask their customers when Big Red shows up, what's important to you? And the people of Sarasota says 5 things are important to us. Get there quick, take away my pain, tell me what we're doing and why, be professional, and be nice. Interesting, only one of those 5 things is operational. Only one of those things is medical. 3 of them is interpersonal. Be professional, be nice, and tell me what you're doing and why. So, what do we really do? What do you really do? What matters? I changed this motto a little bit, and it really brings home, as we bring this class to a close, it brings home what we all do. To faithfully serve the public who have been entrusted to me, you. The public who has placed their faith in me, you, as a protector of their lives, the lives of those most precious to them and their property, and to re-earn that trust every time the bell goes off. That's what it gets down to, folks. Making a difference one life at a time. Making a difference to these kind of people, or the people that work for you, and to him. This is one of Teresa's and my grandkids, Dawson. He's got asthma real bad. They live in Redlands. When our precious daughter calls 911, and the Redlands Fire Department shows up, what do you think matters to me? Put yourself in that position, the position of your customer. What matters to me? Did they get to my daughter's house quick? Did they take away Dawson's pain? Did they tell our precious daughter what they were doing and why? Were they professional? And were they nice? There's a lot of stuff that builds up to that. What do your customers need and want? And what character traits do you have to have as a leader? So now today, which way are you going to go? 48 hours is going to be tough, but they're going to be important. I would suggest you take a look at how you rated yourself. Most certainly, if you rated yourself from a 2 or a 1, go on Amazon tonight, on your iPad or your iPhone, find a book. I think all of them are available out there. Read the chapters that I recommend, and begin to work on developing character traits. Every time I do this class, I understand there's still areas that I have to work on. So where do you go from here? Ladies and gentlemen, the world is crying out for leaders. Great, heroic, trustworthy leaders at every stage of our society, in our neighborhoods, in our families, in our jobs. Trustworthy, noble leaders. We all need to get it. And finally, I'll leave you with this. What truly matters when it comes to leadership, what lies behind us and what lies in front of us, are but tiny matters to what lies within us. Thank you so much for the privilege of sharing with you. I hope you have a great rest of the conference. Thank you.